Are you at a crossroads in life with unanswered questions? How does your past connect to your present life? October Hallam can help you discover how your past connects to your present and is shaping your future. October is an intuitive, healer, empath, and medium with over 20 years of experience helping people navigate through some of life's greatest challenges. A recent client from Egypt says, "October is pure magic. We keep coming back for more," and recommended her to our closest friends. If you would like to book a session with October, please contact her at theancientgift222@gmail.com. Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Dr. Scott Taylor. Before I bring him on, a couple of announcements. This summer, we're planning on filming a documentary. We hope to be traveling across the country and interview your favorite and my favorite people, authors, researchers, contactees, and fellow podcasters. The only way we're going to be able to do so is with your help and maybe the universe's help. We're going to jump into it, and hopefully the universe and maybe you guys will decide to help a little bit. If you'd like to help with a donation, we have a Buy Me a Coffee or PayPal option. You can go to supportfkn.com or click the PayPal link, and any amount is greatly appreciated, and it will help tremendously. We're going to cover all the awesome topics I talk about here, and we have great things planned for this documentary. We want to be able to travel to as many states as possible and talk with as many of you and have you even be a part of it. So if you'd like to get involved with the production in any way, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. And if you make a donation through supportfkn.com, you're also going to get access to select chapters from Cory Hughes' upcoming book about the JFK assassination. We really hope that we can get this project going, guys, and I know that you'll enjoy it once we do. Forbidden Knowledge News is always available on Rokfin, Minds, Odysee, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. Check us out on Rokfin. That's where you get our premium content. You also get all the premium content from every creator on Rokfin. Just go to rokfin.com/FKN+, or click the link in the description. Our website is forbiddenknowledge.news, also the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network. All those links are in the description. Finally, tomorrow, Micah Dank will be giving a presentation about astrology in the Bible on the Ancient Gift podcast. If you would like to leave a question for Micah, email October at theancientgift222@gmail.com, and she will field those during the show. Today I want to welcome Dr. Scott Taylor. He is a spiritual teacher, speaker, and researcher on near-death experiences. He is president of the Expanded Awareness Institute, which helps people curious about near-death experiences explore what that experience means to them and to the culture as a whole. He is also author and voice of 6 best-selling CDs of guided meditations on near-death experiences in his Into the Light series. Dr. Scott, welcome. How you doing?
I am well, thank you. Actually, some might say awesome. It's been a good day, and I so appreciate you having me on your show, Chris. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Well, that's great. I love to hear. Awesome. That's always wonderful. And I've been looking forward today as well. You have a fascinating story that I can't wait to get into. And we're going to get into not only your near-death experience and how it led you to not only study, but develop and teach others a method of exploring the same places that they experienced during their near-death experience, which is extremely fascinating. I want to get into all that, but let's start with a little bit more about yourself, your background, and we'll get into your experience.
All right. Um, well, it's easy. I grew up in a small town in southern Minnesota and led a pretty normal, little league kind of life. And then for the first 20 years of my professional career, I was in the department store business. First started out working for Macy's and then went to a regional department store. And after that, department stores, it's not the business model that's working these days. So I went to be a faculty member of one of Minnesota's colleges, and I mentored small business owners for 20 years. So that's kind of fun. And in the middle of all that, I had what we now know was a shared death experience. And that led me to have this other part of my life, which was to explore what it meant to be human. And in particular, because I'd had this shared death experience, I was I had been to an extraordinary space, and I really wanted to go back there again. And that led me to just the igniting of my curiosity. And I traveled the whole world over trying to find a way to find that energy that would allow me to go and revisit the place that I'd been in. And I traveled the whole world. I went to the pyramids. I went to the Sphinx. I went to the Oracle of Delphi and Machu Picchu and more cathedrals than you could shake a stick at. Stonehenge, yada yada. Studied with shamans in North and South America. Studied Emoto religion in Japan, and finally I found the Monroe Institute, which allowed me to enter into those meditative states that would allow me then to go back to the light. So that's the shorthand of who I am and where I came from.
Perfect. Now, you mentioned shared death experience.
Mhm.
Could, for the audience that may not be familiar with this term, what is a shared death experience? I know that they're all pretty much familiar with near death experiences.
Yeah, really good question because that nomenclature hasn't been around for a long time. Raymond Moody wrote about it about 10 years ago. He defined it. And he's the guy who defined the near-death experience. So he wrote the first book about near-death experience, and he wrote the first book about shared death experiences. And essentially the difference is, for the most part, not every time, but for the most part, in a near-death experience, people's physical bodies have been traumatized, and the physical body dies, and it's brought back to life again by some manner or another. And during that intervening time when the body was dead, the soul leaves and went and had an experience and then came back. Well, shared death experiences are kind of like that, only it happened to me. I wasn't the one that was making the transition. So typically what happens is you're bedside of someone that's making it their transition. And as they leave their physical body and go to the light, they invite you to come and go with them. So, in no way is the experiencer hurt or harmed or, in any way. That's the person who's making the transition. But there's two people that go to the light. So there's one making the transition and the experiencer. And it's a little bit different because In a shared death experience, what you are witnessing is someone's actual transition, as opposed to a near-death experience where it's your own experience. And we know from the research that you get what you need in those experiences. They seem to be really tailored for you so that you get the experience that you need in order to continue living in the physical matter reality. But that's not true in a shared death experience. You are actually accompanying somebody and witnessing their transition. And of course, in the meantime, you get to be a part of all of that and what they feel and what they see. And so if you're reading some older books, originally it was called an empathetic near-death experience or a shared near-death experience, and now it has its own name, shared death experience. And the first book about that really serious research just came out in January. It's called At Heaven's Door. Hang on. Oh, well, drop stuff on the floor. Here we go. It's written by William Peters, and it's the first book about shared death experience. It's got 800 people. So the validity of his stories is really high. I mean, you know, that scientific test that you do, it's written beautifully. It's got wonderful stories, and I think it really helps explain this relatively new phenomena.
Perfect. Well, let's get into your experience. What were the circumstances that kind of initiated your experience?
Thank you for asking, Chris. It happened in 1981. I was a young man, and I was in love with Mary Frances. And Mary Frances and her son Nolan, who just turned 7, were coming home from sailing, and in the process of driving home, they were involved in a horrific car accident. And Mary Fran was killed outright. And Nolan had a mortal head injury. And the ambulance took them both from the accident scene to Mayo in Rochester, Minnesota. So they got the best care on the planet. It took Nolan about 6 days to make his transition. That becomes important because Mary Fran was one of 9 children, and Nolan was the eldest grandchild. And so what that meant was there was plenty of time for all the friends and relatives and cousins and aunts and uncles and grandpas and grandfathers and her family and my family. I mean, we all gathered to hold vigil with Nolan during those 6 days. Well, because there were so many of us, we had divvied up the week into 2-hour shifts so that we could be with him. And as it turned out, I got the shift from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. on the morning of the 6th morning. And I did it with Mary Fran's oldest sister, Jannie. And we were there, and he was in a coma, and he had never come out of the coma. But one of the things we know about people who are in that state is the last sense to go is hearing. So it was important for us to tell stories, and so we did. We told him stories about who was there in the waiting room and who had come and who was coming. And then actually there were some funny stories too, because it got to be nighttime and this room is filled with 40 or 50 people. And so the young men in the group had raided Mayo. They went in search of couches and just took all their cushions and laid them on the floor in the waiting room. And so there were, fun stories, but it gets to be about 4:45 in the morning, and Jannie, who's a trained trauma nurse, went to the end of the bed, took a look at his chart, looked it up, all the monitors that were going on, and it was clear where it was going. And she held out her hand to me, and we brought chairs up and sat by Nolan's head and told him that he'd been a very brave boy and that he had fought so hard to stay alive and to stay with us. But if his mother should come, and remember, Mary Fran had died 6 days before, we told him that if his mother should come to pick him up, that it was okay for him to go with Mary Fran, and that we loved him dearly. And then we said our goodbyes, and off we left at 5 o'clock, and the next shift came in. Well, it wasn't 45 minutes later before the nurse on the floor came into the waiting room and woke us all up and said, it's time. He's slipping away. So we all filed into this little hospital room. And as luck would have it, I was probably at the end of the line, because when I got into the room, it was already 4 or 5 deep around the bed. And so I just sat on the windowsill next to Mary Fran's youngest brother, Willie, and we waited. And when the heart monitor finally just does that ominous flat line thing, and it does that tone, what I witnessed was Mary Fran coming across the veil and scooping her son out of his physical body. And together they had this exquisite reunion, as only you could imagine, between a mother and child. And for some reason, here I am sitting on the windowsill, but I was able to participate in that reunion. I was able to feel what Mary Fran and Nolan were feeling as they had a chance to be together once again. And then, much to my surprise, the two of them turned to me and came and embraced me. And then the three of us went to the light. And when I entered into the light, it was the most extraordinary experience. Chris, I can't tell you how loving and unconditional the acceptance, the unity with the love of the universe. It's overwhelming, and it's complete. And what it meant was that Mary Fran and Nolan and I had some time together, and we got to express to each other our feelings, our affection for one another. We got to say our goodbyes, and then we got just to be there in each other's presence for a while. And then at some point it was complete. We were good. And the two of them turned and went off further into the light, and I came back to my physical body. So that's part A of the story. There's a part B.
Yeah.
And
now, before we get to part B, I just have a quick question for you. Were you a spiritual person? Did you have beliefs in the afterlife before this experience?
Well, like I said, I grew up in small town Minnesota, and I grew up attending a mainline Presbyterian church. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a soul. If you go and you hang out with angels in clouds or something, I don't know. It was some sort of vague idea that there was an afterlife. But no, I wasn't a particularly religious person or a particularly spiritual person. It was part of my family heritage, but it certainly didn't explain how I could witness Mary Fran and Nolan coming across the veil, or how I could leave my physical body and go with them into the light, and for the ability of us to communicate with each other in a way that is beyond words. That conversation didn't happen in English. It happened at a much deeper, more profound level. And to say it in English would be to make it small. It's bigger than that. That ability to communicate, heart to heart. And the other thing that is, to further answer your questions, one of the things that is not in the lexicon of the Presbyterian Church is this concept of bilocation, which is what is part B of my story, is that I was up in the light with Mary Fran and Nolan saying our goodbyes, and I was fully present in the room with the other grieving relatives. I didn't have a term for it then. Now we know it as bilocation, two separate consciousnesses that were fully functional. So what that meant was I'm sitting on the windowsill and, Willie's sitting right next to me, and the radiance of that space, the love of the universe was like inside me, and it was trying to burst out. That's how it felt. And here I am in this room, and I'm in this state of ecstasy, in this state of joy, in this state of, requited love. I mean, it was this extraordinary place, and my face showed it. And I knew it did. I had this big grin on my face. And if anybody had looked at me, they would have misunderstood what was going on. So I did the only thing I could think of, which was I covered my face with my hands and stayed that way until both parts of me were back together again, and I could rejoin the room, and be with the grieving relatives and, hug them and be with them in their grief, because they had just lost Mary Fran 6 days ago, and moments ago they had just lost Nolan. So, it was a double tragedy within a week, and it was really sad. And so, yeah, I had a traditional background, but boy, it did not explain what had happened to me.
Man, that is so interesting. So, whenever you came back and you kind of came back together, you said,
Yep.
what was your process for kind of unraveling what just happened? And, what did you talk to anybody about it at all at first?
No, I didn't. I've had 30 some years to hold it. 81. Ooh, dear. 40 some years. Got to do the math there. To be able to put words to it. At the beginning, I really couldn't. It was outside of my ability to talk about it. And so I didn't for a long, long time. And then about 15 years later, I'm doing my doctoral work in leadership at the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota. If you haven't heard of it, it's Minnesota's largest private university. And my dissertation chair and I are trying to figure out what I'm going to write about for my final paper. And he was the one who suggested, why don't you look at near-death experiences? And he'd had a neighbor that had one, and it profoundly changed how she viewed the world, and it changed her leadership style. There's the tie-in. And he said, I think this could be a fascinating topic. And, you seem to be spiritually bent. Why don't you look at that? Well, the first thing you do when you do that is you do a literature search. And it was in that literature search that I discovered a book by PMH Atwater that described a empathetic near-death experience. And literally what it said, this one paragraph in there, it said, sometimes when people are bedside of a person making the transition, the two of them will go together to the light. And this is called an empathetic or a shared near-death experience. And it completely opened my eyes, because I had no idea that that's what I had had, because, what happened to me didn't fit at all what near-death experiences were all about. That was about trauma and your body dying, and it didn't fit the particulars. So why would I think that had it happened to me? Plus, it hadn't been defined yet. So that's when I discovered that I had a community, and I became active in the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I was on their board for a couple of terms. I'm their co-MC for their international conferences now. I do that because I wear a kilt, and it seems to get everybody's attention at the conference, and I get to tell my really bad joke. Are you ready, Chris?
I'm ready.
All right. So at the beginning of the conference, I'll walk out, and I'm dressed in full Scottish regalia. And I'll walk up to the mic and go, I'm assuming that some of you are wondering why at a near-death conference, somebody would come out dressed in full Scottish regalia. Well, there's an answer to that question, and it is that in order for me to do my research into near-death experiences, I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of people who have been killed and brought back to life again.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that sets the tone for the conference. We can't be all serious here.
Yeah.
And it works. And we have great fun at those conferences. And for your listeners, I highly recommend if one, they hold them all around the country, plus on Zooms, during the pandemic. I think this next one is in Salt Lake City in September. Go to one. God, there's fun. And about half the people there have had near-death experiences. So there, hundreds of people, and they all have you've got a special little colored button, and they'll tell you their stories. You just, sit down and, yeah, this is what happened to me. So you wind up getting really smart about near-death experiences really fast. And you find out that each one is totally different from everybody else's, the individual, the particulars of them, but the common elements, we've got about 30,000 data points now of stories that are in the archives. And, the common elements in a near-death experience are just nailed down. We know, what they're like. So take the tunnel, for instance. Some people go through a tunnel, and it's a dark tunnel with a white light at the end of the tunnel, just like you'd see on television. Other people, they're walking down a cobblestone path with arching trees overhead. Sometimes the tunnel is just really short. It's one step and you're into the light. Other times you fly fast. Other times you move exquisitely slowly, and you just saunter down the tunnel, and you get to experience the amazing things that are in it. Anyway, so yeah, I'm sorry. I just got going there. I forgot what your question was.
No, that's perfect. Well, I want to find out your insights into this. In fact, most of the people that I have spoken with over the years that work with near-death experiencers, that research it, write about it, even had their own near-death experiences, most of them have been extremely beautiful, profound experiences that changed them spiritually for the better. But every once in a while, very rarely, you'll hear about the experience where a person experiences hell or something very negative.
Yes.
And I'm wondering what your insights into that is. Do you think it's just a person has something with their own conscious, maybe something weighing on them, maybe some guilty feeling or something they know that they've done that is causing this experience?
So my answer is in 4 parts, because in my research, this is how it turns out. One of them is what you just said, that people, they've done something bad in their life, or they have been trained to think that they are a bad person, that they are sinful, and that deserve to go to hell, and yada yada. And so when they lift out of their physical body, the word is you get what you expect, or you get what you need. Well, if you need to have in the literature, it's called an LTP, less than positive. So, that can be anywhere from a hellish experience to one that's just uncomfortable. So that's a general category. So if you need to have one in order for you to grow as a human being, sure, here, we'll give you the drooling monster and, flames and all that. Great. Well done. Made to order. Another one, what I find way, way more often is that some people have been not living up to potential. And essentially what happens, they're having this near-death experience, and frankly, it's like a 2x4 alongside the hip. It's like, whack, Fred, will you wake up? You came into this world to do X, Y, and Z, and you're off doing A and B. Get on plan here. You're a grumpy, nasty person, and that's not going to get you where you want to go. So that's part of it. There's another part that I have to thank Nancy Bush for. She's written 3 books on less than positive experiences, and they're phenomenal. And one of the things she talks about, that I hadn't considered it until she brought it up. Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, where you start off and you gain people, and you go off on this journey. Well, somewhere in that cycle of the hero's journey, there is the need to overcome adversity. And sometimes that adversity doesn't take place in the physical world, it takes place in the non-physical world. So you are confronted with a wall, a monster, an uncomfortable tide pool, or something that you have to summon all of your strength, ingenuity, and curiosity in order to figure out a way to solve this problem that you're confronted with. And as such, you grow as a soul, because you have undone this curiosity. So those are the 3 that I know about. And the 4th one, which I reserve, is I haven't a clue. Some people seem to have near-death experiences that are less than positive, and I can't figure out for the life of me when they tell me their story why. And so I leave that last portion available for me to go, okay, there are mysteries that I don't understand yet. And, maybe we'll understand them in the fullness of time. But right now I can't put a word, I can't put a concept around it.
Now, whenever you started working with the Monroe Institute and doing meditative practices, how profound would you say, and how important is meditation when it comes to accessing these other realms that exist just beyond the spectrum of our vision?
Well, there's a 2-part answer to that. Part A is that I found the Monroe Institute and their form of meditation allowed me to access that light again, that light that I was in with Mary, Fran, and Nolan. And so for in terms of a profound nature, absolutely. I have ongoing relationships with Nolan. He and I are like buddies all the time, and have been since he made his transition. Mary Fran kind of comes in and out of my life and provides perspective on what's going on. So that then led to the ability to talk to other people that I care about and who have made their transition and been in the non-physical universe. So it was a complete door opener for me. And so why meditation, it does, you're right, it keeps cropping up in everything you read about the ability to access non-physical awareness, to access those states that near-death experiences are. And I think it's because meditation over time teaches you the ability to focus your attention and stay in that state for a protracted period of time. That's why I like the Monroe Institute, because they use binaural beat technology to help you access that state, and it holds you in that state long enough for you to learn the tools and techniques to navigate the non-physical universe, and then you come back. But the cool thing about binaural beat technology, whether it's theirs or somebody else's, is that you have the ability to remember it. So you don't need the binaural beats. After a while, you just go, oh, yeah, I remember what it felt like to be in the light with Mary Fran and Nolan. And I can remember the feeling, and poof, I am there. And, the brain has a wonderful ability to learn. And with some repetition, that neural pathways lay down, and you're able to access it easily, quickly, and then hold it so that you can be there. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of meditation, whether it's with Monroe or anybody else who has a school, because they all teach the same skill. The approach is just somewhat different.
Would you say it's the same thing or different in any way from astral projection or other types of out-of-body experiences when you're using these meditative techniques?
The answer is yes. In order to do these meditative techniques, sometimes astral projection or out-of-body experiences, same thing. That's the easiest way to acquire knowledge and to explore what it is that you're exploring. Other techniques, you don't have to. One of the easiest things to learn is what happened to me in my shared death experience, and that's by location. So you can be in another expanded state of awareness, and you can physically be in your body at the same time. Have two consciousnesses, and you can just go all over. It's harder to do. I shouldn't put that out there. But learning to do astral projection takes a little longer. I think learning to do bilocation is really quick. It's no more difficult than daydreaming and realizing that you're daydreaming and you're in your physical body at the same time. That's what it feels like. It happens to be a little bit more clear than a daydream, but there you go.
Now, would you say that there are different areas or different realms, different levels that you can visit or have access to depending on your awareness or experiences?
Oh, yeah. So I did, I created a whole series of guided meditations that take people to the same places as near-death experiencers. That's those CDs, now albums above my head there. And each part of the near-death experience, those common elements, has a distinctly different vibratory state. So if you're lifting out of your physical body and, the first thing that happens is you meet a guide, or you don't have to, but there is a guide there available to you to take you to the light. That's at one vibratory level. You enter into the tunnel, that's another vibratory level. At the end of the tunnel, you burst into the light, that's another vibratory level. And what not many people realize is that there are three distinct types of light, and each one of them carries a very different experience. So there's white light, you see that all the time in the media, but there's also black light and clear light. And each of those have a different vibration. And then there's that area of life between lives, also called the park. I go through this because with binaural beats, you can actually sculpt the experience. So if you're telling somebody, I want you to learn about what it's like to make the transition and go through a tunnel. Well, there's a vibratory state for that. So we put that in the binaural beats. You enter into that state, and then the guided meditation helps you to look for this. Are you listening for the sound? Go and touch the walls. What do they feel like? If you put your hand, against the wall, what happens? And each of one of those activities is designed to teach you something about the non-physical universe and how to be comfortable in it and how to navigate in it so you don't get surprised or shocked or whatever. So, yes, they all have different vibrations, and that's a wonderful thing about technology is we can fine tune that to help people get there.
Now, within these levels, there are apparently entities, and you spoke of the possible human entities that have passed, but what about entities that may have not ever been human or different types, maybe angelic or celestial?
Yep.
Are these out in those realms too, available to interact with?
Absolutely. There is the area where you've heard of a life review. Mm-hmm. And typically when you go through a life review, you are accompanied by a divine being. Sometimes they have shapes, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're just kind of this, at least when I picture them, they're kind of this amorphic ball of energy, brilliant, loving, absolutely loving energy. And they, so they're there, and their job is to communicate, as you're going through the life review, to ask you only one question. What did you learn? What did you learn? And so for your listeners, when you're going through this life review, there's none of this judgment, trial, jury thing. No. It doesn't exist. It's you going through it, reliving your life again and having a chance to look at it to see how well you did. What did you learn from that experience? And if you forget, you have this divine being who's there with you to assist you to get the most out of that. So yes, they're all over in there. Angels, they've never been to physical matter reality. And then some have, like our guides, like the guide that takes us from our physical body to the light, very often is a loved one, grandma, grandpa, Uncle Fred. So yes, they've been on physical matter. And then in the light, there's the reunion with all the dead relatives. And of course, they've all been in the physical world. So yeah, you get both.
What about entities that may not have our best interest in mind, trickster entities, things that try and maybe bask in our light and try and intercept our thoughts and consciousness when we're in these states? Is that something that, to be concerned about when you're attempting this?
The short answer is no. And there's a reason. The most powerful thing in the universe, the fundamental aspect of this universe, not quarks, not molecules, not anything, it's consciousness. Consciousness is the foundation of the universe, and it is the most powerful thing that we have in our arsenal. I don't like that word, but in our toolbox. How about that? And so when I was trained, and there's a bunch of other systems that do the same thing, when you enter into these expanded states of awareness, there is some sort of affirmation that you put out there that says, this is who I am, This is what I want to accomplish. This is, what is going to protect me. These are my helpers. And thank you very much for all assistance and advice. And you kind of craft that affirmation so that it works for you. And those tricksters don't show up. Those entities that have, low vibrations, negativity. No, because consciousness is the most powerful thing we have, and ours is equal to anybody else's out there. So it's our ability to just remember, yes, I am protected at all times, because that's what I desire to happen. And when people enter into a near-death experience or the death experience themselves, they'll often find themselves, say that the image that you have, Chris, is that when you make your transition, you're going to go on a cloud, you're going to wear a white robe with a gold belt, wear Birkenstocks, and, sing hymns and while you're standing on this cloud. That's your vision of heaven. And when you leave, that's where you get to go. It's provided for you. And then somewhere along the time, about the 4,629th time that you sang that same hymn, you're going to go, is this all there is? Really? We get to spend eternity singing these same hymns that were written in 1654? I don't think so. There's got to be more. Bam! That's the door opener. That idea, you can change your circumstance by changing your desires, and to say, what's more? How else can I understand God's love, or however you want to put it? And it opens for you, and you now get to have another kind of experience. And that same thing seems to happen over and over and over again as we become more aware of who we are as a human being, as a soul, as an eternal soul that lives in multi dimensions. There's always one more learning. It's like, oh, that'd be so cool if I knew that. Huh. All right. Poof. It opens up for you. So I'm a big proponent of affirmations when we enter into these spaces. And if people can remember when they're going through these, if you're having a spiritually transformative experience, or you're just meditating on a Saturday afternoon because you want to, it's always nice to have a little something that sets boundaries around who you are and what you want to do and who's going to protect you. And I always like to end with a little gratefulness. Troops upstairs, they like that.
Yeah. A few minutes ago, you mentioned the life review. Do you think that this is a part of everyone's experience, as well as being reincarnated and possibly living multiple lives?
Let's see. It's not part of everybody's near-death experience, because sometimes you don't need it. I didn't need it. I just needed to have the ability to enter into the light and express my affection for Mary, Fran, and Nolan, and to say our goodbyes. That was enough. That was enough for me. Some people, it's not. It's important for them to take a look at their life and how that transgressed. I'm sorry, transpired would be a better word. And remember that in a life review, we do it from 3 different viewpoints. We get to relive our own life just exactly like we had it. But we also get to exhibit or to relive it from the other person in the scene. So like right now, in my life review or our life review, we will have this moment, and I will get to be Chris, and Chris will get to be me, and we'll get to understand, the impact that we made on each other's life. And then there's the omniscient point of view, which is, okay, so how does this interview impact Chris? How does it impact Scott? But how does it impact our families, our community, the world at large, humanity in general, both past, present, and future. So, it's a lot more. There's this wonderful richness to it that is available to some people who have the near-death experience, but I would contend that it's available to everybody when they have their final transition, that they get the privilege of having that near-death experience. I'm sorry, that past life review. And so here's the cool little secret. And you guys that are listening here, this is worth the price of admission. So you're having a life review, and you've got this divine being standing next to you who's asking you, what did you learn? What did you learn? And you encounter a scene where, frankly, you weren't a very nice person. In fact, you were probably a jerk. And you can turn to the divine being and go, whoa, can I relive that one scene? Can I back this up and then relive it, but I'm going to do it differently this time? And you can. And instead of being a jerk, you're a really helpful, nice guy. And then you get to see how that spreads out instead of what happened the first time. And the cool part of that is that becomes part of the human experience too, just as valid as the first time when you were a jerk. So you get to have both. So you get to fix your karma right away. And it's such a gift that we have the ability to do that, and that we have divine beings that will help us through that. And they can say, well, what if you relive that, only you said this and that instead of, so you do it a third time or a fourth time. Great. Awesome. All of which presupposes that we get to have multiple lives, and that we arrange for those lives. We come down, we have an agreement that says that, yes, I will have this life here in the physical world. These are the lessons I want to learn. These are the folks that are going to help me learn them. And, off we go. So I know that at some level, Mary, Fran, and Nolan agreed that they were going to be killed in that car accident on some level. It was profoundly sad for me, and I grieve their physical loss. And it was a tremendous gift that they gave to me. It's kind of, for those of you in the Christian faith, one of the people that, when I make my final transition, one of the people that I really want to talk to is Judas Iscariot. He was the person who, turned Jesus in and accepted the 30 pieces of silver. And Jesus couldn't have been Jesus without Judas Iscariot. And so if that's true, what kind of person would sign up for that duty to become one of the most hated people on the planet? And, in my mind, it has to be Jesus's best friend. Who else would do that? Who else would sacrifice themselves to such a degree to allow one soul to fulfill a magnificent mission? So, yes, we have multiple lives. And I had a friend of mine the other day just tell me that she put it great. She said, so, what's the point of being envious? Because, last time you were rich in this life. This time you don't have so much money. Last time you were healthy. This time you have sickness, so, it all balances out. You get to have all these multiple lives. And the whole point is to give you this rich experience and then by, not by osmosis, but by the very fact that we as human beings are interconnected with each other on the non-physical level, we get to learn from all of the experience from all of the humans. So it's this tremendous richness that comes out of duality that allows us to be who we are.
Yeah, and that kind of probes into the question on a grand scale of good and evil, and is this all just this duality, this nature of our reality? Is it just part of something we basically created for ourselves to grow and expand our consciousness from? And there's not really necessarily something inherently evil or good. It's all about duality and us learning and growing our consciousness.
So this is Scott's view, okay? And the way I've seen it from the people that I've talked to who've had near-death experiences and shared death experiences, they will tell you that the ultimate reality is this place of loving oneness, this consciousness that is loving oneness. Full stop. That's it. That's all there is. And that when physical matter reality was created out of this oneness, where duality was created, now we've got contrast. And we've got love and we've got fear. We've got good and we've got bad, whatever bad is. And so those kinds of experiences are all associated with the physical universe. Does it exist in the ultimate reality? No. That you can move out of physical matter reality and experience that oneness. And we come from that oneness, and to that oneness we will return.
Yeah, that's very well said, and I think that's a great way to kind of to look at that. Now, earlier you kind of mentioned that the different rules for the non-physical universe and how we can kind of choose what rules to live by. Could you get a little bit more into that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, because what happens to people who have near-death experiences, they leave their physical body and they're now in the non-physical universe, and they discover the non-physical universe doesn't work the way it does in the physical. Just a couple of examples. There, time doesn't exist. So we were talking about reincarnation just a moment ago. Well, when you look at that really carefully, you go, oh, all these lives are happening simultaneously, because there only is one time period, and that's now. There isn't a future, there isn't a past. That only exists in the physical. So in the non-physical, time doesn't exist. Space doesn't exist. I mean, you can be anywhere, anytime that you want. Just take your consciousness and put it there. Like I said, consciousness is the most fundamental thing in the universe, which, to be a little more clear about it, is that intention runs everything in the non-physical universe. What you desire, what you want to happen, formulate it, and poof, that has that ability. Our senses are all enhanced, and they work differently. Case in point, vision. Vision isn't stereoscopic, it's 360. So when you're in the non-physical universe, you get to see it all at the same time. So, these 5 physical senses are all there. And then there's a thing called synesthesia, which is they'll cross-sensate. So you can smell colors and taste kinesthetic. I mean, it gets mixed up, which gives you a fuller representation of, what it is that you're experiencing. But there's also that 6th sense that is intuition, which means that things, you just know them. There's no beginning, there's no past, there's no story. You have a question and it's answered, and you know the answer. And so, and there's probably more senses, but that's what I'm going with right now. So what that means is when we come back into the physical world, those that have had near-death experiences, what happens then is that they'll sit there and they'll remember, oh, I can put my consciousness anywhere that I want. I've done that. Can I do it here in the physical? And the answer is yes. Can I view 360? Can I know things intuitively? The answer is yes, 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 yes. We don't know that because Scott Taylor again, my vision of the role of the brain is to filter out all of that information from the non-physical universe and give us just what we need so that we can exist here in the physical universe. Otherwise, it'd be way too much information. Because what's important around here, is there a snake in the grass? Is there a tiger in the tree? We got to know that stuff. And we have to have that ability to focus and feed ourselves and feed our families and that sort of thing. Anyway, but when people come back from near-death experience, they realize that those filters are they're just optional, and that you can open them, and you can open them without that much effort. These meditation traditions I was talking about, you have the ability to focus with intention, and they'll open. And so all of a sudden you're going, okay, I would like to be here, but I would like my mind to know what's going on in Paris, France, right at the moment, at the base of the Eiffel Tower. I've got a friend there. I wonder what he's doing. You sit, boom, off you go. Well, today we call that remote viewing. And it's perfectly commonplace. People train in how to do it. People are very successful in how to do it. Monroe's famous for it. But all of a sudden, then you begin to go, well, why can't I do this or do that? And they teach themselves. Yes, those rules that are in the non-physical universe, we have a subset of that in the physical, but we can choose which ones we want to be with. That's where mediumship comes in. The ability to talk to dead people. Do you believe you can do it? Do people do it? Sure they do. They'll do it all the time. So the answer is we are purposely restricted in our senses here in the physical universe. We agree to that when we come in, and then after a while, he's like, well, what's next? Remember that question? What's next? What else could I do? And some people who've had SDEs, STEs, NDEs, those kind of spiritually transformative experiences, their doors have been blown open for them. Some people can choose to open those doors. Some people are inherited with those doors open. So, yeah, it's a fun thing to be able to sit there and go, I wonder if I could do that. And that's one of the great things about attending classes. You're in a room with 20 people and you're figuring out how to go someplace or do some sort of something in the non-physical universe. Everybody comes back and they share their stories, and you just look at them and go, what? You did what? Okay. Well, if you can do it, I can do it. You get that little competitive thing going and give it a whirl.
Yeah, and you just mentioned, they have classes for this stuff now. Well, if you look back at our ancient ancestors, it seems that they had a lot better understanding of spiritual principles and all the concepts we discussed today. Well, you move forward in history for whatever reason, we have our memory wiped and we're a completely different materialistic society that's lost a lot of the knowledge of ourselves and who and what we really are and our spiritual purpose here. But also during the times of these past couple of years, I've seen kind of a new awakening towards this. A lot of people becoming more interested in these types of topics and hidden reality and consciousness and spirituality. And like you said, they now offer classes for this. More places are coming up. More people are kind of coming out and talking about this. Do you see us headed towards kind of a new era of spiritual enlightenment?
Yeah, I do. And it's for the same reason when we lost it. So think, I grew up in southern Minnesota. So think the Lakota Indians out on the prairie of southern Minnesota, northern Iowa, the Dakotas. And there's a tribe, right? And somebody in the tribe is really gifted at this sort of thing. And they go into a trance and they go, the buffalo are 3 miles over that hill. And so, the hunters gather their gear and they go over the 3 miles and, shoot themselves a buffalo, and they've got meat for the winter. Well, that's hugely important because their very survival depends upon this talented person getting it right. If they get it wrong, it's not good for the troops. So over time, you don't need that skill. We can go to the grocery store, and buy whatever you need. So we don't need to know that the buffalo are 3 miles over southwest. Well, we're entering into a new era now, I think, where we need those skills back again. Because for us, we just need to take a look at what's going on in the world right now. And it's a very dangerous place if we don't figure out that we are one human race and that we are all interconnected, and that that we have much more to give as a loving species than one that is competitive and destructive. So I think there is a calling now that says we need to discover again our true identity as, what are we? What does it mean to be human? And what does it mean to be interconnected? And what is that, the implications of that for our culture, for our species? We're being called to, acquire a set of skills that will allow us to move into the future. And I don't see there's, we got to do it. And, thank goodness there are a lot of people out there who can show the way, and pick your path and walk it. Thank you, Grandpa Hunter. That was one of his. Just pick your path and walk it.
Well, Dr. Scott, thank you so much. This was fantastic. Before you head out, let the audience know if they'd like to find out more about you, your books. What's the best way for them to do so?
Thank you for asking, Chris. I think the easiest place to find me is neardeathmeditations.com. Neardeathmeditations.com. And there you'll find my albums that I talked about. And that's a great way to start. But if you're really interested in exploring the non-physical universe and going to those places that near-death experiencers go to, we have a 5.5-day course that is awesome. Just blow your socks off. Wonderful. I have a great co-trainer, and we do it on Zoom right at the moment, which is incredibly effective. So I highly encourage you to check that out. My podcast is called The Afterlife Files. So go to YouTube, type in The Afterlife Files, or Scott Taylor. You see a bunch of my talks on there. And at my website, there's a contact me page. So if you get stuck or it's like, which one's best for me, I'll answer you. Might take me a day or two, but I'll get back to you. So awesome. Thank you for asking, Chris. Appreciate it.
For sure. Well, Dr. Scott, thank you so much. That was fantastic information, and I'd love to talk to you again in the future.
I would too. We had a good time.
For sure. Yes, we did. That was great. All right. Till next time, everyone, have an excellent evening, and we will be talking again tomorrow.